Black Ops 6 Zombies hasn't succeeded in the way that many of us were expecting. While the improvements to Black Ops Cold War's gameplay systems and return of a playable crew once again had everyone very excited at launch, slowly but surely that flame has dwindled out with each new Zombies release. This is strange in some ways because I feel the gameplay has consistently hit the mark with each update, and the few times they didn't, they have been listening to community feedback and rolling back said changes. However, I believe the true element of Black Ops 6 Zombies that is falling short of the mark time and time again, and is thus killing the hype and engagement for the game, is the writing. As a content creator who has nearly exclusively covered the COD Zombie storyline since before the end of the ether, I have seen many different games come and go with different story premises for how zombies should work and are executed under different teams. And Black Ops 6, more than any other game, has made me want to sit down and have this conversation about the writing. Not because it's necessarily the worst by any means, we have definitely had some lows over the years, but rather because of what Black Ops 6 Zombies leaves on the table in terms of character arcs, respect for prior storytelling and canon, and what made the Dark Ether story so interesting in Black Ops Cold War in the first place, at least from my perspective. I know that's controversial, lots of people still thought Cold War Zombies was boring as well, I see it all over social media regarding its story, but personally for me, I think it was very underrated, and my entire Cold War Zombie storyline video that I did, I think helped elevate the story and allowed those who neglected it to tap into that narrative. But let's jump into why I'm feeling this way for Black Ops 6.
What is it you're looking for?
Looking for some old friends.
Let's set the stage. Black Ops 6 Zombies arrived with a lot of promise. After Cold War brought us the Dark Ether storyline, a fresh yet familiar take on zombies, it built a world brimming with potential. We got Requiem, Gregory Weaver, Oscar Strauss, Mackenzie Carver, and Elizabeth Gray. These folks were our radio voices, our mission guides, and even if they weren't playable then, their depth shone through the intel, cutscenes, and those little moments of banter. Cold War, in my opinion, nailed a balance of big plot beats like Zaikov's betrayal and small human touches like Weaver and Sam's trauma or Carver's history in Vietnam, making him distrustful of higher-ups in Requiem. It was a storytelling layup, setting up arcs that begged to be explored, especially with the story of Samantha, Weaver, and Richtoffen's family history. While Cold War's methods of delivery were sometimes divisive, I find it hard to deny how tightly written its story was, and how each piece of its massive intel log held valuable information, whether it be important to the narrative or establishing the overall world. To me, even the most mundane ones served a purpose, it just faltered in inaccessibility for most fans, and probably too much quantity for most fans to get into. Despite that, I consumed it all, so probably have quite a different perspective from the majority of fans who I just don't think even bothered. Enter Black Ops 6. The Requiem crew steps out of the radio and into our hands finally as playable characters, alongside a new cast like Maya Aguinaldo, and finally a speaking role for Edward Richtoffen. Gameplay-wise, it's a win. Refined mechanics, responsive updates, and listening to what the community asked from prior titles. All the good stuff. But the writing, I feel, is just not capitalizing on that Cold War goldmine and the sheer layers of setup and world building that it executed. Now, I'm not here to trash it, it's not bad by any stretch. Of course, I've been breaking it down and expanding on it in videos, and I couldn't do that if I was just not into it at all. There is plenty to theorize about, in my opinion, but I think the problem is, I seem to be one of the very, very few people doing that, which I think is a testament for how much the community is actually consuming this story and into it. Because back in the Ether days, almost every single Zombies channel was not just covering the updates, the gameplay stuff, they were also covering storyline and theories. And now it's dwindled to just a couple people, if that. And whilst I am covering the storyline extensively, and I personally think my videos have increased in quality a lot from my old storyline content and are constantly improving as well, I can tell from the amount of views my videos are getting that it's clearly something that people are just not that interested in right now. As back in the day, if I was making the exact same style of content during when the storyline was being consumed a lot more, these videos would be getting 5 times, probably even more views. And even during Cold War, I wasn't making as as many storyline videos back then, but the few ones I did make were still getting way more views than they are today. And considering that there are less people making storyline content now than there ever has been, means that it's something that I should be getting even more views on because there are less competitors. Yet despite that, interest is at an all-time low. That's reflected in the amount of content creators covering it on YouTube and on TikTok, but also in the amount of views said storyline videos are receiving. Again, not just for me, but the other few people left covering storyline content, or those that just dip in every now and again. From a personal perspective, I do think that the storyline is fine, solid even, but there are many things holding it back and not allowing the average audience to get into it clearly. In other games, I probably would not even notice or complain, honestly, but decent feels like a missed shot when a setup was primed for fantastic. So let's dig into why I believe the writing's falling flat and how it could soar, because I know the team at Trek can knock this out of the park. I think it's just been taking too long right now to get fans primed to dive deep into the story.
I am a good soul.
Before we unpack what's not clicking in Black Ops 6, let's take a step back and look at what Black Ops Cold War Zombies got right with its writing. This wasn't just a game that brought us a new crew and a shiny new Dark Ether storyline, it was a love letter to what makes classic zombies tick, and an incredible lesson in world building and subtle character work, incredible details hidden just below the surface. I know this is controversial and many people disagree, but I think that's because they just haven't consumed all of the intel, and might have not even picked up on many of the nuances of that game. I see people say all of the time, Cold War had no layers, there was nothing to theorize about. There definitely was. There's still so much left there that's still not being explored, which is leading Black Ops 6 to feel underwhelming in my opinion. Because those nuances don't matter if they're never going to be expanded on. Understanding why Cold War worked can shine a light on where Black Ops 6 could level up, because it's not just about nostalgia, it's about execution. First of all, Black Ops Cold War gave us Requiem. Like I said before, Gregory Weaver, Oscar Strauss, Mackenzie Carver, and Elizabeth Grey, not as playable characters, but as voices over the radios, intel drops, and cutscenes. You'd think that would make them feel distant, and it definitely had some fans saying it was a problem, but their personal arcs and stories still helped some fans to grow attached. The writing made them feel real. Weaver wasn't just a gruff leader, he was a guy carrying scars from his past, like losing his eye to Kravchenko in the campaigns, or his guilt over Sam and the incident with the house. We see intel from both of them slowly talking out their traumas about this event in journals that allowed keen-eyed fans to begin to piece together the story of Richtofen's family and his son Samuel's death long before it became a plot point we saw physically in Black Ops 6. Strauss, he's this eccentric brainiac who studied Kraft's journals, geeking out over Ethereum in a way that's oddly endearing. Carver's a soldier through and through, his wartime intelligence experience helping him figure out about the Forsaken long before any other character. But his banter with Grey, like in Firebase Z when he grumbles about her optimism, shows a softer edge in spite of his service history. And Grey, she's sharp but compassionate, tying the team together with lines that feel human, not as militaristic as some of the other members of Requiem. What's brilliant here is how the writing balances these personal beats with the big plot. The Dark Ether story kicks off with a D machine, dropping us into a world of wonder weapons and eldritch horrors, but it's the slow burn to Forsaken that sells it. Zaikov's reveal as the Forsaken isn't just a twist, it's built up through intel, like his logs as the lost Russian, painting a desperate man turning dark. When Sam sacrifices herself to stop him, Weaver's plea,
Sam, whatever you're thinking of doing, don't do it!
echoes Dempsey's cry from the Giants.
Richtofen, whatever you're thinking of doing, don't do it!
A subtle nod that ties it all back to where it began. The ether. It's not in your face, it's there for fans to catch and chew on without jingling keys in front of our faces. The dialogue's another gem. Side characters like Raptor 1 or Dr. Peck get lines that flesh out the world without over-explaining, and give them enough character and charm to be loved by fans. Peck's snarky line,
Bring those back to the lab. I could use them to slap some sense into you.
In Mauer Toten tells you he's a jerk with a brain. No exposition needed. Intel digs deeper. Ravenov's history with Omega, Strauss's theories on Ethereum crystals. It's a treasure trove for theorizing. I remember piecing together Zygor's arc with the community and guessing the identity of the director of Requiem through various theory videos. Every radio a clue to unravel. That's what hooked us. Details matter. A keen eye and ability to remember details meant that you could keep a step ahead. Black Ops Cold War also nailed show, don't tell. Maps like Firebase Z drip with atmosphere, battered outposts, eerie portals, dead bodies, telling stories. The writing didn't need to spoon feed, it trusted us to connect the dots. Look at the Firebase Z ending. Sam exits through the portal dressed in scavenger gear. Items that resemble Nikolai's goggles, Taku's katana, etc. This is a visual love letter to Ether. No dialogue required. It's subtle, layered, and respects the legacy. But of course, like any game, Black Ops Cold War wasn't perfect. Some intel did feel like filler, and not every character got huge arcs, but in my opinion, it stuck the landing with the ending for the game. The characters grew, the plot twisted, and the world felt alive, and we fell for a crew that we had largely rejected on launch, leading them to go the step ahead and make them playable. Fans like Mr. Waffles praised how it breathed a new life into zombies with a story that honoured the past while forging ahead. Cold War set up a slam dunk for Black Ops 6, a crew were ready to step into the spotlight at last, a dark ether ripe for chaos, and a fanbase itching for more details on the entangled past of Weaver, Requiem, and Samantha. It's that groundwork established in Black Ops Cold War that makes Black Ops 6's writing stumbles stand out, not because it's awful, but because it's not building on this potential goldmine.
I thought you were dead.
It's not just Requiem getting shortchanged. Peck, Ravenov, even Strauss again, they are underutilized in every map. Peck is a wildcard scientist with a murky past who ended up forgotten after Citadel Day More. What exactly happened here because he was on the character list in the blog before the map released. However, he doesn't get a single line of dialogue in all of the tomb. Who knows if he's even going to be present at all in the future. And Ravenov's introduction showed a picture of him with Samantha Maxis that is, at best, incredibly difficult to think about where it fits in the actual timeline of when they knew each other, and at worst, literally impossible to exist. From Firebase Z's intel as well as the build-up to the map pre-release, the intel heavily implied that it would be Ravenov and Samantha Maxis' first meeting in person.
I have a contact within Omega Group. He wants to meet. I've seen the intel he has firsthand. He's the real deal.
Okay.
Let's just say I am more of a free agent now. There are many spies and traitors within our national institutions.
I understand.
Which leads me to wonder, why are you a traitor? I've seen your record. A founding member of the KGB counter-terrorist detachment, Alpha Group. You took part in operations across the globe. Central America, the Caribbean, Angola, Afghanistan.
Yes, I am a loyal soldier of the Soviet Union. And I have done questionable things. Terrible things. But I am no traitor. If you knew who was running Omega, and I believe you already do, you would not even have to ask me that question. I am not a traitor to my country. Despite their slogans and mantras, Omega are not who we are.
Are you certain of that?
Look at the files. Learn something of their work. There you will find your answers as to why I am choosing to do what I am doing.
I will, soon. Stay safe. You will hear from me again.
It's never outright stated, but it is heavily implied. Sam said, I have a contact within Omega Group he wants to meet, as if they had only ever communicated remotely before. Of course, Sam gets captured by Omega, and after she was rescued by the Requiem strike team, she was kept in containment at Requiem headquarters until the end of the game. So there's no real time for this photo to have ever been taken. A nitpick, yes, but something that helps to illustrate a surface level knowledge of character interactions without combining the details more finely. Now, I wonder if the writers made a mistake mistake here, because if you look at Ravenov and Samantha Maxis' wiki pages, there is a paragraph that says Ravenov would eventually contact rogue B&D agent Samantha Maxis, where they would meet in Romania. During their meeting, Ravenov gave her crucial information regarding Omega Group's plans to control bridges between the Dark Ether and their world, collecting and utilizing Ethereum as an energy source to win the Cold War. She would then meet Ravenov again in Vietnam to infiltrate Omega Outpost 25 in Vietnam and expose their plans to Requiem. Unfortunately, Samantha's plans would be discovered by Omega Group, leading to her being captured by Dr. William Peck, who would throw her in the Dark Ether after the failed interrogation. However, I'm not sure if this information is actually accurate, because I have literally gone through the entire Cold War intel and I can't find any reference to this specifically. And within their conversations for Firebase Z, it implies that Omega's investigations are relatively new, and whilst it never says verbatim this is the first time they are meeting, she is asking who he is, what he does, etc., implying it's very early on in their relationship. So I'm not really sure why the wiki states this. Maybe I am wrong here and there's a piece of information that I am missing, but it seems like their aid in Romania was just over the phone and wasn't actually in person. And I wonder if somewhere along the lines the wiki got mixed up and wrote incorrect information, and then the writers, when, researching for the characters, just used it as a baseline because they might not have an official one in-house. And that's how this mistake has potentially come about. Again, I could be wrong here. Let me know in the comments below if there is any confirmation on this in the intel at all. I just cannot seem to locate anything personally. I can only find one reference of Sam being in Romania, where she goes off-field in a churchyard there, and she does say she spent the last 7 years working alongside spies from both East and West, but it never says Ravenov specifically, so I guess potentially one of those could have been Ravenov, but I just can't seem to find any evidence for this.
I'm going to assume you can hear me, because the alternative is far too depressing to think about. I'm in the field, but not an actual field. That would be silly. It's a churchyard in Romania. Don't worry, there are no vampires. Even if there were, I have garlic. And weapons. To be perfectly clear with you, I have reason to believe the BND have been compromised. So, I have gone what some would term a little bit rogue. It pretty much means I'm operating without authorization or oversight. But since I've spent the last 7 years working alongside spies from both East and West, you can hardly blame me. Don't worry, I know my scorpions from my frogs. This experiment, end station. If I'm right, it may really be the turning point the Russians believe it to be. We have to stop them.
They are sidelines for random, shallow, one-off characters like Archibald, who dominate the narrative spotlight. Compare this to Cold War, where every character, even minor ones like the skeleton holding the free Die Wonder weapon, or the CIA agents in Mauer Toten killed by Klaus, got intel fleshing out their stakes that also furthered the plot at large. Maya's an exception here. Her arc with Nathan and Franco feels fresh and fast, but that might be because she's a Black Ops 6 original, free of prior lore baggage. She's great, but it shouldn't come at the expense of everyone else, especially those whose stories have been getting set up for years. A fantastic example is the line in Citadel Day More when Kraft essentially says,
Richthofen, his family died in a fire. He would never have set on this path if they were still alive.
Everything went wrong for Eddie when someone killed his family and burned down his house. And Weaver gives no reaction. This doesn't make any sense at all. This imbalance kills the theorizing that used to drive a zombie's hype. Back in the Ether or Cold War story, every line was a breadcrumb, details to dissect, connections to chase. But now? Plot threads drop like flies, and looking too finely into details anywhere only ever seems to lead to unintentional inconsistencies with prior storytelling. Another example, Carver tosses a Casimir grenade and says,
"Whoever Casimir was, I'm a fan."
Despite meeting Zykov himself, the Forsaken, and knowing he invented it. It's not just a lore slip-up, it's a sign that it doesn't seem like people are double-checking these threads. Now, I personally think this wasn't intentional. There is the community way of thinking around this where Carver's brain is just rotting due to all of the Ethereum exposure, and he's starting to lose his memories, similar to what happened with Element 115 in the past. And that's one way to think around this. However, just the delivery of the line and the way it's written makes me feel like this was unintentional, but maybe he was being ironic, I really don't know. Fans on YouTube, like in the comments under just about anyone's videos, especially in mine, keep calling the Black Ops 6 story lazy or boring, and I don't entirely agree with that sentiment, but clearly Trek have done something to create this reaction, and yes, it could just be a bubble seen in the comment section. However, it feels a lot more prevalent than the past, and even if they are intentionally being mean-spirited, I'm sure some of them are not meaning to be, it could be because subconsciously they miss that meticulous care.
I'm ready to come in, Leader. We have a lot to talk about.
At the Black Ops 6 Zombies reveal, Trek told the YouTubers, "We're doing more show, don't tell." That's a killer goal. Zombies thrives on environmental storytelling and subtle clues, and they also said that there would be more cutscenes than ever before. But so far, Black Ops 6 isn't showing much more, and only seems to be telling less, with no intro cutscene for the tomb. Whilst Black Ops 6's dialogue is packed with one-off jokes, the intel mentions Richthofen's porn rentals, student loans, quips on the Liberty Falls bank heist notes. However, a lot of this lacks substance and wastes interesting opportunities for storytelling. Compare that to even classic Der Rees. Dempsey name drops Die Glock, and it's a quiet nod to history tucked inside a one-liner that adds interesting depth.
Element 115, Wonder Waffles, D Glock. Fuck it, let's just go kill some freak bags.
Here, a bank heist could have been a character moment. Say, poor people left behind as Project Janus throws their hometown into new technology and new jobs, desperately giving one last bid to escape from Richthofen's thumb, but it seems to just be tossed away for a laugh. The intels know better. The Chaos story nods, like the other Sentinel artifacts being shown, or name drops of Shaw and Scarlet, are neat, but I'm not convinced they are always intentionally as well thought out as they make them out to be. My recent video on the artifact's time travel was a fun theory, explaining how it could have been in Avalon when Archibald found it, so potentially it likely time travels via Yggdrasil at the end of Voyage of Despair. However, I can't help but feel like this theory patches over a writer's oversight, not uncovering a years-long plan. And it seems the community agrees. I see often posts on the COD Zombies Reddit or Twitter lament intel being filler instead of fuel for speculation. It's not about missing Easter eggs, it's about missing depth. And I think there is depth here, as I've been explaining on my channel, but I don't think it should be needed for you to have to watch a YouTube video of me to do some very, very far-fetched theorizing, because I'm not going to lie, whilst I enjoy all of the theorizing, at the end of the day, a lot of it seems far-fetched, and often the case I'm really having to scrape things together to try and make semblance of it all, and that takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of effort to put these theories together, and the average fan is busy with their lives to be able to sit down and do all of this thinking about it. I'm only able to because obviously I make YouTube videos about it and it's my job. And whilst I probably would still be thinking a lot about it if it wasn't, especially during the Ether days, I wouldn't have so much time to be theorizing. And to be honest, if I wasn't making YouTube videos, maybe I would have stopped caring so much about the story without that time after the Ether story concluded. And whilst I love all of the Chaos story ties to the current story, I can't help but feel like it is such a niche story that people only really started to enjoy right when it ended, too little too late with Ancient Evil. And I am only interested in all of the Chaos story ties because I have the time and resources to put the effort into trying to connect all of the dots together. But for the wider audience, I think focusing so much on the Chaos story is not going to get them into this new story. I like it, but at the same time I'm conscious about the wider picture of the community, and I want the community to grow, of course, and I think at the end of Cold War they established a very grounded and scientific story that was probably going to be centered around Richthofen. Yet we're 4 maps into this game now, and they're going the more magical approach, which again I don't think is a bad thing. The Ether story, for example, handled the mix of magic and science very well, but I think the reason why it's feeling jarring for fans right now, because the end of Cold War set up this very grounded approach, which is now being radically shifted to a more magical approach, and it feels like it's coming too quickly instead of being eased in. I think the reason why they're going so hard in this is because they feel they've done the legwork to establish that in Vanguard Zombies, so they're basically bleeding Vanguard and Cold War Zombies together with this game. However, most people didn't play Vanguard, so that easing into this different tone feels like it's coming too quickly, when Vanguard was a very small project comparatively that A, not many fans played, B, have negative stigma around, so just don't really want anything to do with it, and C, even for the people like I who did play Vanguard Zombies and saw all of the potential of that story, because it never got to be fully executed in the way they probably wanted to. For example, we never get a confirmation on if Zykov gets eaten by the Forsaken, he just falls to the bottomless depths of the Dark Ether, then it means even for those who did play, they're struggling to put all of the connections together and are wondering if they're just being forgotten about.
Maya, run!
Here's my hunch. The writing issues stem from a disconnect. With Black Ops 6 pumping out maps so fast, and COD 2025 Black Ops 7 Zombies looming, there seems to be a rush that's showing. And of course Treyarch have been hiring many new employees, and with new writers, they may not grasp the Dark Ether story's full history, which isn't a crime by any means. I mean, like I say, it takes so much time to be able to know all of this information, and the lore is very dense. I'm sure it's so easy for mistakes to happen all of the time behind the scenes. I mean, hell, I make a million mistakes trying to put these videos together, and even in the published videos there's often mistakes. It's inevitable. But I feel as if there is a lack of oversight catching said slips. I'm sure normally a story person would look over all of the dialogue and writing and ensure nothing breaks prior continuity, but there are tons of things in Black Ops 6 that feel like either they are continuity breaking or are a clear missed opportunity because the writer of said dialogue might have not realized the prior setup or couldn't remember, because we're talking about a few years ago now. It feels as though there should be some sort of timeline of each of the characters and their narrative progression written down somewhere. But the way this game has so many loose threads, for example, Weaver apparently had nightmares on Terminus, and he was etching in markings of the Construct and Elder Gods, and honestly, I'm not expecting that to be followed up on at any point now, because so many of these things we were getting excited about before launch don't seem to be getting continued, and I don't know why that is. There's no point in having this mystery there if it doesn't actually really seem to mean anything, and it feels like so many things just get forgotten about. I thought that when Treyarch put together the Chronorium and the official timeline for the Ether story, that after that, because they had to retroactively look at all of their old past work, and I think Jason Blundell said it took about a year to even put that together, it was obviously a lot of work to be able to do that, then I would have thought to save themselves the headache of, you know, for example, 10 years down the line having to put together a new timeline, they would instead be noting everything down from now on. Because when the zombie story was initially forming, it was unorganic. It began as just little scraps that eventually became something much larger. So it makes sense why they weren't keeping track of it all back then. But now they're intentionally trying to put together a story which is very different to the early guerrilla days of how the storyline was shaped. For example, a lack of tracking here could potentially be Archibald knowing the Ice Staff's legend, despite in the Ether story it being tied to the Great War's roots. And this feels off. Whilst potentially, like I've theorized about in videos, it could mean the return of a Great War, at the same time maybe once again I'm looking way too deep into things and this was just an oversight by the writing team. I really don't know. It's hard for me to know what's meant to be something left as a breadcrumb to theorize about, or what's being forgotten about due to how many loose threads are just not being touched on again. Another example of this is Strauss forgetting to ever mention he's read Kraft's journals, and was quite inspired by them in Cold War's intel, even though they cross paths in Citadel Day more. And it makes no sense why in the Terminus ending cutscene, he's so surprised by the Sentinel artifact and the magic of Prima Materia, essentially saying it's all boogie tales, whilst he is a man of science. Again, this just doesn't make any sense. Like I said, Strauss studied Kraft's journals, so he should have known about all of the magic and demonology that ties into the Chaos story, and his research as well into the Sentinel artifacts. Why was he so taken back by this idea of magic, when how is that any different from all of the science he has been studying? It's just really a different way of explaining it, because at the end of the day, everything we saw with, for example, the Forsaken, that is so magical. How is that any different from the Dark Ether gods we saw in Vanguard Zombies? The line between science and magic is blurred, and I felt this was really out of character for Strauss. Now again, you could write it off as, well, the Ethereum's messing with his mind and he seems to be addicted to Ethereum, so his brain is just deteriorating, but I just don't want it to be the case where every single weird thing like this, where we're like, wait, that doesn't really line up with who they are, we have to excuse as it's just some sort of mind warping, because then it's going to feel like everyone has that exact same excuse and it doesn't make them unique. Like the line I mentioned before about Carver blanking on Zykov when using a Casimir grenade, even though he would definitely know who he was. It's not just law-breaking nitpicks here, it's jarring when Cold War, like I said before, seemed so tight in its writing, and that was the largest attracting factor for me. Everything felt like it had a purpose and could piece together into a larger puzzle, and I felt like they were setting the chess pieces for Black Ops 6 Zombies, the follow-up and the sequel to that game. I felt like it was going to be just as tight, but this time have the weight of Richtofen being a centric character and more ties to the old stuff. Yet Richtofen now has been largely absent from the story, and instead they seem to be more focused on tying things into the Chaos story than the Ether story, which again seems odd when Richtofen was set up at the end of the game and we know the original characters are returning next year, so you would think they're trying to reconnect more Ether storyline threads, not Chaos stuff. Like I said, I enjoy the Chaos being a part of all of this, but it often just feels like they're jingling the keys in front of us saying, hey, Chaos is canon, but they're never really hard confirming how all of the pieces put together, and I'm just sat here wondering, are we even going to ever find out what happened after Ancient Evil? Are we ever going to find out what happened to these characters, or are they only ever going to just be mere references or selling microtransactions in the store and not really ever have any weight to the overarching story? Because it's all good having these references, but if it never becomes a piece of the larger puzzle, what's even the point then? Because right now it's getting very hard to put together the entire lore, because when thinking about the Chaos story stuff and we look at the history of Citadel Daemon and the Tomb, there's so many things that we could think, well, this could be because of the Order or because of the Nine, yet we don't really know how that stuff fits together in the timeline, and honestly I don't really ever know that we will. We have some specific dates, but they're never hard confirming things, which leads, for example, the history of the Owl to feel a bit weird, because we think, well, it might be tying into stuff with the Order, but because it's never outright stated, we're just left there as, well, maybe. And I'm not saying everything should be confirmed, but it just seems like nothing is getting confirmed in a way, or at least there's only really a few things getting confirmed, and the few things that are don't really actually matter, if that makes any sense, and don't feel like they're ever going to get followed up on. And I think that's also a big problem with the fact that we've just been chasing the Sentinel artifact on every single map on a fetch quest, and that feels dragged out. We should have just gotten the Sentinel artifact and then we should go and activate it the next map. Like, that's how it should be, yet it seems like this entire story is just a fetch quest for the Sentinel artifact. We've taken 2 maps to get it, why wasn't it just gotten on 1? And now we've gotten it, we need to bring it back to Liberty Falls, and I just guess it's probably not even going to be activated on Mansion, that's probably going to be saved for Janus Towers. So basically the whole game is just us waiting to activate the Sentinel artifact as the peak. There should have been other things, more important things to do in the meantime, and then we get the Sentinel artifact at the end, because it really just makes the Sentinel artifact feel pointless. We're just like, get it over with, activate it already. It's making the stakes feel a lot less, because even if something ridiculous and crazy happens with the Sentinel artifact at the end of the story, which I definitely feel it will, whether it's returning Richtofen's family to him or completely messing up the Dark Ether or plays a role in why the original characters return, whatever the case may be, I think it's going to have tremendous effects on where the storyline heads in the future. However, I think we're going to be less shocked by that because we've been waiting for so long just to get to that point that it's not going to make whatever happens seem as crazy as it actually is if we weren't beating around the bush for so long on a goose chase.
Finally, a good song.
Black Ops 6 does have some gems. Launch maps like Liberty Falls shine with bits like Dr. Pericles Panos and Tommy Joe's Moonshine Bond. It's quirky, grounded world building that hints at bigger story beats as Panos mentions time at Janus Towers, and the backstabbers there.
I'd much rather listen to his war stories than chit-chat with the backstabbers in Janus Towers.
Maya's arc, like I said before, is another win. Personal, driven, a new face done right. The big plot, Sam Richthofen, the Dark Ether stakes, is intriguing on paper. However, I believe it's the execution tipping over itself, not the ideas. And this could all change with Mansion depending on how much is unveiled there. Gameplay's a strength too. Like I said before, updates hit the mark, and when they don't, Trek listen, proof that they care. The writing can get there too with the same love. This isn't a teardown, it's a plea to seize on what's on the table. Cold War handed them a slam dunk. Let's not leave it hanging. So how do we turn this around and get that flame roaring again? Well, before the launch of Black Ops 6 Zombies, I started getting lots of messages from fans and even many other Zombies YouTubers saying that, they've dipped from the story for a while, but they saw the Liberty Falls intro cutscene and they wanted to get back into it, and they were asking me, which videos that should they watch of mine, and the consensus between them seemed to be they were excited to get interested again, mainly because of Richthofen. And I think that's been Trek's biggest weakness with the writing for this game, is they completely missed the mark in having Richthofen sucked into the Dark Ether in the intro for Liberty Falls, and then just have about 1 radio for him per map. Yes, that's about to change, I think, with Mansion, as he's going to take a much more integral role, I would hope, if we're going to be trying to rescue him. Regardless, they've lost a lot of fans already at this point. People were ready for this new story and ready to get into it again for those who dipped after the Ether story, but the focus on the Chaos story and putting Richtofen on the backseat is what allowed those old fans to not have the opportunity to get back into it. And yet, connecting the Chaos stuff probably is only interesting for about 20 people on Twitter, including myself. The Chaos story didn't get followed up on for a reason. It's not a mistake for them to connect it, it's just being prioritized, I feel, over the things that people care more about, such as Richtofen. And if the Chaos stuff even connected directly more with Richtofen beyond the fact he's probably going to use the Sentinel artifact, then it would feel important. But right now it just feels like the Sentinel artifact is becoming a plot device to get from map to map, as well as to allow basically anyone to do what they want and Richtofen to get his family back. Black Ops 6 Zombies has all the pieces, it's just about putting them together right. I've got some thoughts for the team at Treyarch, and hopefully if they catch this, it lands as the friendly nudge it's meant to be. The writing's got so much potential, and with a few tweaks, I believe it could be the knockout punch we are all rooting for. So let's break it down. First, let's boost that internal literacy on characters and their past arcs. Like I've said many times, Cold War, I believe, gave us a treasure chest of history with Requiem, Weaver's trauma, Strauss's studies, and all that juicy stuff. In Black Ops 6, it feels the writers are forgetting some of their history and might not have the full playbook. Take Carver forgetting Zykov invented the Casimir grenade, he's literally met him, or Strauss not mentioning Kraft's journals in Citadel Day more. These aren't deal breakers, but they dim the shine. I wonder if this could be because, as well, they have too many characters right now. I mean, there's a lot, and it's meaning that people like Peck and Ravenov are being thrown to the wayside. I think it's been a mistake not interchanging the playable crew between maps, to be honest. After Citadel, for example, Maya could have gone off.
This is for me.
She got her revenge. She doesn't need to now go on a revenge arc for Richtofen as well. She could have then been replaced by Peck or Ravenov as a playable character to make the narrative more sharp, more focused. A quick fix, make sure everyone knows these arcs inside out. Maybe run a crash course on Requiem's Cold War journey, get those details flow naturally into the dialogue. Fans notice when Weaver sounds like Weaver, not just a soldier with a gun. I think there needs to be, if there isn't already, a timeline for every single character, as well as the overarching story. Even if it's never released to us, the public, to get a semblance of what is going on and what to build from. Even those who might have even written for the characters themselves can easily forget things. I mean, I forget what I've said in videos all of the time. We're talking about years and years of history. Secondly, there's a clear need for more oversight on dialogue, or at least more hands on deck. Right now, it feels like the big plot beats are solid, but the little lines slip through the cracks. Archibald knowing the Ice Staff's legend, despite the Ether's Great War, or Grey's one-off bank heist quip. They are not game ruiners, but they pile up. A dedicated story person could catch these, someone whose whole gig is keeping the lore tight and the dialogue meaty, but I suspect there's a bigger snag. With maps dropping so fast and COD 2025 on the horizon, the rush might be stretching the team thin. More writers or a sharper QA pass could smooth this out. Imagine Peck riffing on Omega instead of fading into the background. Oversight could make that happen, but I understand time may not be afforded here, or even budget. Thirdly, and this might be the root of it, there's a vibe that internal documentation on characters is spotty. Think about their arcs, histories, quirks, where's the master file? We've seen signs of this before, like in Blackout when the transit bus driver popped up as Ted. That name, it was from the Call of Duty wiki, not an official source. Ted was the fan name that we came up with, likely standing for Tactical Expert Driver Droid. That stuck online, and it looks like the devs googled it, saw it on the COD wiki, and ran with it, or just always thought that was his name because it became synonymous with the community. Something similar happened with Leroy from Buried. He was actually never officially called Leroy, but people thought he was, because it was a fan name that we came up with. And then Treyarch officially informed us that his name is indeed Arthur in the official Call of Duty timeline. And by no means am I saying that they shouldn't go with the fan theory. I mean, that's happened so many times in Call of Duty Zombies intentionally. However, I'm just not sure if this was intentional. It's charming in a way, but it could hint that there is not a lore bible. No internal go-to for who these characters are. In Black Ops 6, that gap shows. Strauss not recalling Kraft, Carver blanking on Zykov, Weaver's history of having to flee the Soviet Union with his mother when his father was executed by Stalin lays the groundwork for such an interesting parallel for the situation he put Richtofen through. They almost mirror each other, but none of this has been ever addressed, likely because some of the writing team are not even aware of this history with Weaver. The fix, there needs to be some sort of tool, a proper character database or story bible in their systems, detailing every arc, every line, every connection. I know when they did the Chronorium back in the day, I believe Blundell said it was physically written, so that's always an option, but technology and artificial intelligence has gotten so much better since then, they could probably put it together using some sort of software much easily than ever before. Not just for Requiem, but Peck, Ravenov, even side folks right now like Panos. It would be a one-stop shop so writers aren't leaning on fan sites or memory. When I'm researching for videos, fan sites are the biggest thing for me, and sometimes I'm reading something on the wiki or some other forum, and I'm like, I don't really remember reading that in the intel, and then I have to do some digging, and I look through everything, and I'm like, wait, that's actually incorrect, or this is just a theory that has just been stated as canon, and I've probably done the same in many videos as well. I've thought something is canon, or I've misremembered something, and people watching my videos would then take it as such, and it's very hard, it's very, very difficult, which I definitely think having an official database, something like the Chronorium, helps so much, because it's so much easier for me to keep track with the Ether story, because I can just pull up the timeline anytime I'm thinking, is this something that is official or not? Is it something that's only implied and not confirmed? Whereas now that we don't have a timeline, it's very hard to know, and so many theories or even just outright mistakes slip through the cracks as being canon in the community, and I probably contribute to that as well. Probably everyone who's talked about the storyline has in some capacity. Here's a page from another book that might help. Take the Elder Scrolls series. It's been spinning tales for over 30 years, a lore beast that makes zombies look like a short story. When Elder Scrolls Online dropped, though, the writing stumbled hard. Lore beats were off, characters felt out of tune, and the story was in a rougher spot than Black Ops 6 ever hit. Fans weren't quiet about it either, but here's the cool part, they turned it around, and it wasn't rocket science. Step 1, the devs owned it. They said, yeah, we didn't hit the nail on this. Step 2, they brought in a quote-unquote lore master, a senior writer who'd been in the trenches of the past titles, someone who knew every dragon, Daedra, and Dusty Tome by heart. All new story stuff had to pass their desk, vetted for consistency. Step 3, they didn't just move forward, they went back, patched out wonky lore books and dialogue, and kept that rigor for every update after. Over the years, they've cycled through a few different lore masters. It's not a forever gig, of course, just a role for someone like, say, Craig Houston, who's steeped in zombies history, to step into until they pass the torch. Point is, it worked. Elder Scrolls Online story went from shaky to gold standard. Now every update is a fever of excitement in the Elder Scrolls lore community, with new lore drops shaking the story. Imagine that for zombies, a lore guru keeping characters' threads tight, smoothing out the bumps, and letting the dark ether shine like it should. Beyond that, let's refine what's already working. Spread the spotlight, give Peck a moment to snark about his past, let Ravenov wrestle with Sam's shift, ditch the fluff. Whilst I like many of the Chaos story ties, I feel like a few of them could have been swapped out with more about Richtofen, hints at his plans, because right now we've got nothing really to go on. And Citadel Day Moore, for example, the intel is pretty much all Archibald. I don't think we needed that much. We needed definitely some more of Richtofen and some of the other crew. I think what's happened here is too many people complained about too much intel in Cold War, and they've almost stripped it back too much in this game. I'm not saying even more is necessary, but I definitely do think there needs to be more important ones. I think as well, they need to show us physically the story more. Use map details like Cold War did with Firebase C's wrecked outposts. A graffiti tag of Requiem lives or a busted best director ever mug could say more than a dozen throwaway lines. This isn't about tearing down what's there, it's about building it up. The team's got the talent, Cold War proved that. A little more literacy, oversight, and a solid lore tool could turn decent into dynamic. The cards are there on the table ready. Let's pick them up and play.
That's the artifact. Then let's find it before he does.
I don't think Black Ops 6 Zombies is failing, it's just not soaring yet, especially story-wise. I think as well with the maps being released so quickly. The writing's decent, but it could be phenomenal, and I know Trek's got the chops. To the devs who might be watching, you've built something with killer potential. Gameplay's there, the world's there, the writing just needs a bit more polish. Tapping more into Cold War's roots, giving us those juicy threads to unravel, and this could be a classic. While some fans are mad, most aren't. We are eager, hungry. We've seen Treyarch nail it time and time before, and we are rooting for it again. But what do you think? Are you feeling the writing slump, or do you feel I'm off base? Drop your thoughts below. This game has so much to offer. Let's help it shine. Usually I don't make too many opinion videos nowadays. I feel as though because I'm covering so many storyline videos, that people are thinking I'm gelling with everything, because obviously those are mainly just information based, or what I'm excited for in terms of theories, so I don't think this gives off my other opinions. I still agree with everything I'm talking about in my theories, and I still think there's lots of meat there, there, otherwise I wouldn't be coming up with them to begin with. But like I said before, I'm seeing the larger community is just not into it, and I understand why as well, due to all of these reasons discussed today. And I think that's why many people in the comments are saying the characters are boring. That's something I see everywhere. They're just saying they don't care about any of these people, but I think it's because the threads and who they are is not being followed up as consistently as Cold War. I think the way they were written in Cold War was a lot sharper, and if they just translated that into playable characters, people would enjoy them more, but I feel like it's not. You would think that them becoming a playable character would add more nuance and depth to who they are, but it feels like all of the characters are very cookie cutter and seem very one-dimensional in comparison to who they used to be. Everything about their arcs is being forgotten or just not touched on enough, leading us to not really identify with them as people and have an empathetic connection to them when we don't even really know much about them. And one second they're getting emotional over something, but then the next second they're just forgetting about it. So then we're like, well, what even matters really? But yeah, do you agree? Let me know. Anyways, thank you for watching the video. Make sure to subscribe if you're not here for latest and greatest Call of Duty news and information. So anyways, thank you for watching, and bye.